Welcome to Midwest Paranormal Presents Paranormal Soup. Totally screwed up my intro on the webcast, but hey, we're here. That's what matters. But tonight, our guest is Terry Lovelace, author of Incident at Devil's Den. This book is about an alien abduction, a series of them, and his experiences. And I'll tell you what, I've read a lot of books on alien abduction, but none affected me like this book did. It's made me look deeply, and I said this last week about this book, it made me look deeply at some experiences I've had in my past. Am I an alien abductee? I don't know. It's not about me, it's about his story tonight. But man, I tell you what, if you're interested or even have the slightest thought about alien abduction and you want to learn more about it, this is the show, and his is the book you need to buy. Incident at Devil's Den. And of course, tonight we have a special co-host with us, Heather Wade. She's returning October 1st. Coming back with the Kingdom of Nye. I am so excited. She made my day when I heard she was announcing she was returning. She's our co-host. She's hanging out with us tonight. We're not interviewing Heather. Heather is hanging out with us and being a co-host. We will take phone calls later in the show if we have time, because it's about Terry's story. But if you call in, your question should be about Terry's story. Just remember that. Heather's here to hang out, have a good time, and join the discussion. So, speaking of that, we also have the World Wide Web of Weird we're going to do here. A short one tonight, but we are going to do it, so let's get rolling into the show. Welcome to another night of Paranormal Soup. As I said before, I'm your host, Jason Bland. Tonight, like I said before, Terry Lovelace, author of Incident at Devil's Den, is on with us. And of course, we have the Paranormal Soup team. So let's bring everybody up. For people listening on Late Night in the Midlands Radio Network, we are a webcast. You can watch the show on Facebook at our page, Midwest Paranormal Presents Paranormal Soup, where you can see and watch us. And we do have some pictures and some videos tonight you can see, but I will try to narrate as best I can. And we have a great group of people here to join the discussion. Speaking of, my lovely co-host, Jamie D, is with us as always. How you doing tonight, Jamie?
Doing great and very excited about tonight.
I'm very excited. That's why I screwed up my intro. For people watching. Yeah. I was like, is it streaming? Is it live? Is it really on? Okay, it's on. Oh, wait, I gotta hit my intro. Whoops. And of course, our video engineer, Jeffrey Chan, joining us to do the World Wide Web of Weird. And from Florida, St. Augustine, Rob Autry himself. Hi, how you doing tonight, Rob?
Good, doing good. It's going to be a good show. It's going to get interesting real quick.
Yeah, we're going to have a lot of fun. And our guest tonight, Terry Lovelace. How you doing tonight, Terry? Thank you so much for joining us.
Couldn't be better. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to tell my story.
I appreciate you coming on my show to tell it, because I do truly mean it. This book, guys, really made me look deeply. It can scare you, and some of this stuff might, if you're not familiar with the subject, especially. But tune in, because it's an important story. We need to hear it. We were just talking before the show. I hate calling it a story because this is your life, and you lived it, and you guys really need to hear it tonight. And as for the first time on Paranormal Soup ever, I've been dreaming of this day. I'll have to say it. We have Heather Wade with my favorite Star Trek emblem. Yeah, guys, she's not going to come on video. You know that. But she is here with us. How you doing tonight, Heather?
Oh, it is so good to be here tonight, Jason. And we couldn't ask for a better guest in Terry Lovelace. You want to talk about a fascinating story. You're absolutely right. When the listeners hear from Terry Lovelace and what he has lived through, then the alien abduction phenomenon is going to become much more real in their minds.
Exactly. That's what it did to me. It's what it did to me. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, let's do what we do every Sunday night, is the World Wide Web of Weird. Hopefully I don't screw this one up. Tonight on the World Wide Web of Weird, we're going to start. We talked about this last week. It's been definitely probably the number one most viral paranormal story, if it's not paranormal really. But it definitely raised the intrigue of many when they closed the Solar Observatory in New Mexico. And it's been the talk of the town in the paranormal community. A lot of speculation. And I said it could be a pretty pedestrian crime thing last week, and maybe it was. Some people are still not sure, but let's get into that. Again, people listening on Late Night in the Midlands Radio Network, we are a webcast. You can come over to Midwest Paranormal Presents Paranormal Soup and watch if you want to watch, or just listen, and we will narrate what we are watching and looking at here. But Albuquerque, New Mexico, a federal search warrant was released Wednesday, revealed that the Solar Observatory located in the mountains of New Mexico mysteriously closed for 11 days and had been shut down by the FBI. A lot of you guys remember this. We talked about this last week. Remember the guy went up there. Heather, have you seen any of this yet? Have you seen? I know you've been busy.
This story is really causing a stir. People are writing to me about this story. It's captured the attention of conspiracy theorists out there, and of course, people that are just interested in solar observation. So please do fill me in. I'm dying to hear more. This has something to do with child pornography? What?
Yeah. So that search warrants come out by the FBI that revealed in July, agents began searching for child protection database and found child pornography linked to an IP address at the Sunspot Observatory. Some people are calling shenanigans on this too, and I got to read more on this, but I believe, they also closed the post office down. Well, I guess this guy was, I want to make this quick. I want to read the whole article, and you guys can go find this article at cbsnews.com. But he was uploading child pornography from their internet IP. And he was like running a computer. Oh, yeah. And
in a government facility. He thought he would get away with that?
Right.
I smell something fishy on that, man.
See, that's what everybody's saying. They think it's not true, that this is a cover story, and maybe they're right. I don't know, but the story is he was uploading these videos, and if he was, you're a horrible person, and I would beat you with my fists. But he was uploading these videos, and the FBI started investigating, and then they confiscated the laptop he left running overnight because he's continuously uploading this stuff. And when he came into work the next day, he started freaking out. Where happened to the laptop? And he started talking about they needed better security. And what if somebody tries to come here and shoot somebody? And when he said that, the manager of the observatory, who knew about the investigation going on, notified the FBI, and they decided to shut it down and evacuate because this guy could be a potential risk. That is basically the story they're putting out there. Leave it to the audience to speculate on that.
Yeah, well, these days, Jason, if the government comes out and says anything, it's going to be questioned. People have lost their trust.
Very true.
And that's the truth of it. That's the truth of it. And you see that with all the wild conspiracy theories. To conspiracy theories, to me, that shouldn't even be called that because there's a lot of evidence to them. But all these things lay down to one thing. None of us trust the government anymore, and we have good reason not to.
And not even much any authority figure. I mean, we've lost trust in our police forces. We've lost trust in our authorities that give us news. Nobody trusts the news. So really, you've got a case like this. It's no surprise that nobody believes any of it.
Especially when they were so quiet about it for, 11 days before this came out. So, people are going to speculate. Let's move on, though. Let's move on. All right, so the next one, we're going to play this video here. This is from campaign season is finally kicked off. This is from citypages.com. This is a campaign ad challenging Eric Paulson, a Republican congressman known to be deathly afraid of his own constituents. Go ahead and play this political ad. I don't endorse any political candidate. I just think this ad's funny.
I thought I was good at hiding. And Eric Paulson comes along. I mean, how can you have tens of thousands of people looking for you all the time and not one of them find you? I started to wonder, did Eric Paulson really exist? I mean, where's the proof? Some blurry photo taken from miles away? I had to know. Paulson takes piles of money from Big Pharma and votes to erode essential health care protections. So, the most likely place to find him is at a big pharmaceutical company. And that's where I went. I was prepared to stay there for weeks. It took 7 minutes. I was so shocked when I saw him walking by. I almost dropped the camera. I got it. Visual proof. So take it from me, Bigfoot. Eric Paulson really exists.
That is the best political ad I've seen in my day ever. It's hilarious.
Oh, yeah. Oh my God. Well, the paranormal is officially mainstream, ladies and gentlemen.
Next Bigfoot will run for office. Yeah.
We sure hope so. He'd be a good candidate.
Right. All right, let's move on here. I want to go through this quick. This is a short World Wide Web of Weird tonight because we got a really great guest. Let's move to number 4. Then we're going to skip 3. I want to go to father frozen in fear from spotting a creepy image on his baby monitor. And as a parent of two boys, and we had a video baby monitor, I would look at that thing and I'm like, as an investigator, I'm like, man, I'd like to see something. As a father, please don't let me see something. Please don't let me see something. And that comes first, honestly. I don't want to see something in the baby monitor. I would totally freak out like this guy did. Terrified father, 31, frozen fear. This is from Daily Mail, and it's been on a number of sites. Frozen in fear after spotting creeping floating object above his 13-month-old daughter's cot. Stephen Armstrong saw a spooky orb visiting from the other side on his baby monitor as his 13-month-old daughter, I cannot talk, Ella, slept in her cot. The 31-year-old said that after seeing the moving orb, he had to pluck up the courage to enter Ella's room. I just froze and I didn't move, he said. I don't usually believe in spirits or stuff like that, but this was creepy. Chilling isn't his or little Ella's first spooky encounter at the home in Blythe, Northern Berlin. I totally butchered that. I'm the king of butchering of words and names, Heather, just so you know, so just laugh at me. Stephen claims that previously, once again, as Ella slept, a doll mysteriously appeared in her cot. I kind of brushed it off and said there had to be something else or some other explanation, he said. But when I saw the baby monitor, I went white and even had to pluck up the courage to go in the room. Yeah, I remember there was many nights where I just get bored and look at that baby monitor, and I like to just watch my kids sleep. I'm sorry, I do, and I'd like it's that like as an investigator, if I saw something, I'd be like, oh my God, and as a parent, I would totally freak out.
No, I'm looking at the video on the screen. It's absolutely just. I'm seeing the light, the orb. It's not exactly a round orb. It looks like there's a little more to it, but it's just hanging out in the corner of the screen there. And that, for some reason, wait, there it goes, and now it goes away.
Now,
God,
what
that
would
is
you say as a logical
the
person, though? Because I, as an investigator, the one thing I have to say about it is it could be an ant, it could be a bug getting on the camera. That's the only thing. The only thing I like about it is his story. He had a something that was put in his baby's crate. He didn't know how he got there, and they obviously feel like something's going on. But as an investigator, I've been shown these things, and you see how bright it is?
Yes.
Okay.
It looks like an insect to me.
That happens when they get close to the infrared camera. So this has been very viral. But we do point out things like this. But you never know. It could be something paranormal. It could be. But as an investigator, I look at it and go, well, this is the possibility. And it's a good possibility. Is it what really happened? I don't know. You have to look at what's going on in the home, too. And he said he had some activity.
Yeah, well, it's true. You got to look at the whole entire situation, but there's something very creepy to me, Jason, about the fact that the little light doesn't go toward the child. There's something extra creepy about it keeping its distance. I don't know about you.
Like it's peeking in, and then it wants to peek back out. Like, oh, I'm just checking in, and then I'm checking back out. He talked to a psychic, actually, and the psychic told him it was a family member. Take what you grain of salt if what you think about psychics or not. I think very highly of a number of psychics, but said it was a family member that put the doll in the crib and did that in the video. That's checking in on the baby, and he did recently have a family member pass. So that's another possibility.
Well, then that very well could be.
Wait, that looked a little strange at the end, the way it just bent down, though.
I saw that.
Yeah, definitely.
One more time. Look at that. The way it's almost like intentionally turning away. Like, okay, I've seen what I need to see, and I'm going to go now.
That's what I said. It like peeks in and peeks out.
because we look at a lot of CCTV footage because of his job, but right at the end, something looked off to me, the way it bent and like went down.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to get it. People can go check this video out. If you go to dailymail.co.uk, look for the article, Father Frozen in Fear, Spotting Creeping Floating Object, 13-month-old daughter. That's the title of the article. Check it out for yourself if you're listening, or you can watch Paranormal Soup on our YouTube archive later in the week when it pops up, or go to Facebook and get seconds and watch it there. But check it out. Just get your opinions. Okay, last one. I want to end with UFOs since we're talking about aliens tonight and UFOs. We were talking, we got a cover of Terry's book up here. You see the triangle UFO. We're going to get into that tonight. But, a couple weeks ago, I started sharing an incident in August 31st in Texas, Springland, Texas, I believe it was, or was it Soma? I can't remember, with a triangle UFO. Well, there's been another UFO incident it's not triangle. Now, that's one from Fort Worth that Jeff is showing right now that happened, I think, back in July.
Wow, look at that.
Oh, no, not July. This one's even older. It's in Houston. This one was Houston, Fort Worth, Houston, 2014, 2015, compared to the photos below. So that's the original one that people had seen. There was a lot of sightings of it. Now there's this new one, if you want to pull that one up. There we go. Okay, so this one is from September 18th, or this is the update. Okay, they have an update on here. They say local casino in Mystic Casino in Minnesota. It's supposed to be Texas. Oh, I'm sorry. The Fort Worth one was Texas. They're comparing it to that one. I'm sorry. It's been a while since I'd read this article. I forgot. So this was Minnesota, and they're comparing it to the one in Texas. Sorry. But there's a casino in Minnesota, the Mystic Casino, which is an hour away from Stillwater, where he photographed this. They say there's lights. Well, the photographer says no. He doesn't think that's possible, and this thing moved. A mysterious ring of lights has been seen. This is original post. Mysterious ring of lights were seen and photographed hovering over Minnesota, according to a secondary testimony sent into MUFON. The object eventually ascended and to the naked eye clearly resembled a spacecraft, but it only showed up like this. So the witness is saying, now it says secondhand source. So somebody got this photo and turned it in and said this is a story. Maybe it's the casino or maybe it's not, but they're comparing it to this Fort Worth sighting. The question is did other people see it? Did other people see it ascend in the air? This is just like the Texas video I did show. I thought it was Texas when I first read it. I forgot it was the Fort Worth one they were comparing it to because I'm still trying to get more information on that sighting of the triangle craft. But this one in Minnesota, if he saw it and it's down the road, other people had to have seen it, taking pictures or taking notice.
It sure would be amazing to get another photo from another point
video.
of view.
Maybe somebody took a video, is what I'm wondering. So if anybody sees anything else come from Minnesota, and what was the date? They don't give a date actual when this was taken. Oh, man. If anybody else sees anything like this, please, I have an email. I'm going to start making sure I use more. A new one I want people to go to is Paranormal Soup, J Bland, Paranormal Soup, letter J, BLAND, @gmail.com. If you get anything, email me there. Let me know. But that is it for the World Wide Web of Weird, because I want to roll into our commercial break so we can get to our great guest, Terry Lovelace, and his book, Incident at Devil's Den. Remember, guys, listening on, watching on Facebook, I should say, we play music out to Late Night in the Midlands radio network that you cannot hear on Facebook, because Facebook would be like, bad Paranormal Soup, bad, and we'd be in big trouble. So if you're listening, though, on the radio, you get to hear music. And this one's for you, Heather. Heard you rocking out the Metallica the other night, so we're going to play some rock music tonight.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Thank you, Jason.
All right, guys, we'll be back with our guest, Terry Lovelace, author of Incident at Devil's Den. I'm telling you guys, this is one of the best abduction books I've read. I've read Fire in the Sky. I love Travis Walton. I love that story. Whitley Strieber, Communion. I'm a big fan of that book. But this book really, really made me start looking deeply at my own experiences and made me think about them. And we want to hear Terry's story tonight, and I think it might affect you if you've had any kind of these experiences yourself. Maybe not as incredible as Terry's, but mine weren't as incredible as Terry's, but they definitely made me think about it. And it's kind of scary. It's kind of scary. All right, guys, we'll be back in just a few minutes. Tonight on Paranormal Soup, our guest is Terry Lovelace. He's a 6-year veteran of the United States Air Force. He completed a bachelor's degree in psychology at Park University in 1979 and later earned a Juris Doctor at Western University of Michigan Law School. He passed the Michigan bar examination on his first attempt. That is incredible. Terry Lovelace's legal career began in a private practice where he handled a variety of civil litigation and criminal defense cases. He entered public service as an assistant attorney general and later as a general counsel for LBJ Tropical Medical Center and the U.S. Territory of American Samoa. Elected by his peers, Terry Lovelace served as one of the one-year term president of the American Samoa Bar Association. He and his wife Sheila were active members of the Lions Club and worked in events providing free classes and eye care to the island's residents, that's awesome. He retired in 2012 as assistant attorney general for the state of Vermont. Terry Lovelace continues to write and is a frequent speaker at UFO events, and his story was filmed by Strange Curiosity, a television documentary by Nine Diamond Production Company. Now, Heather, that is with us tonight, she sent me a message and said, "Hey, would you like to have an alien abductee on your show?" And I'm like, yeah. I've had a couple, but I'm always up for it because it's something I've always been interested in. And I got this book from Terry, Incident at Devil's Den. I used to read 5 books a week. Having kids, I don't get to read as much like I like to. I have to read for shows and get ready, and it takes me time. His book I gobbled up in a couple days because it affected me deeply and started making me think about my own experiences, and maybe that will happen to you tonight. So let's get to our guest.
Thank you, Jason. I appreciate any opportunity to tell my story. And I'd like to start in the year 2012, the same year that I retired and moved to Texas. I had a fall. I fell down some stairs and thought I may have broken my right leg. And I went to the VA hospital where I get all my medical care, and they took an x-ray of my right leg. And the radiology tech asked me, "Hey, have you been in an accident or had a shrapnel wound or something? Somehow, something to account for a piece of metal in your leg?" And I'm like, I never left the States.
Right.
And I've never been in an accident. And she says, "Well, you have a piece of metal in your leg." And I asked if I could see the x-ray, and she showed it to me. And sure enough, there is a perfectly square, about the size of your fingernail, piece of metal with 2 wires attached to it. And below my knee, there is a flower petal arrangement of bone that are about the size of Tic Tacs. And the tech said, I've never seen this before.
Yeah.
So she called for, it's pretty strange. She called for a radiologist to come and read it while I was there. And he came and he walked over to me and he took his finger and he poked my leg and said, "It'll be right here." And I'm like, "What'll be right here?" He says, "Your scar. There's a scar where that piece of metal entered your body. It's a portal of entry. Anytime the integrity of your skin is breached by a laceration or something, there's going to be a scar." And I'm like, "Doc, I don't have a scar." And he looked at my leg for 15 minutes. Then he sent his intern to fetch a blacklight, a handheld blacklight, because evidently scar tissue will fluoresce under a blacklight.
Oh.
And they killed the lights in the radiology room or in the x-ray room, and they both examined my knee for 15 minutes. And this doctor was just obviously upset. And I said, "Doctor, how often is it you see a piece of metal or an object like this in someone's body without there being a portal of entry?" And he said, "Well, I've been a radiologist 23 years, and I've never seen it before."
Wow.
So that's kind of the genesis of all this.
Yeah.
Because this story was never really intended to be told. I intended to take this story to my grave. But when I looked at that x-ray, it just chilled me to the bone.
I want to real quick, Jeff. Will you pull up? That's not the right X-ray. He's got the X-ray, but X-ray 1. Bring up X-ray 1 so we can show the audience what Terry's talking about here, because these are incredible. I have 2 copies. There's, this one. It might be hard for the audience to see. I have a zoomed in picture too. It'll be X-ray 1 zoomed in, but for the audience, for people watching, that's zoomed in there. To me, Terry, it's there's a little wire, and it's it's like perfectly square.
Yes. Yes.
You know, Jason, do you mind if I point something out here?
Yeah, go ahead.
You know, Dr. Roger Lear, he did this. He took implants out of people. And one point that he used to always stress to us is that it's absolutely impossible for an object to enter the skin and, number one, there not be any inflammation in a response to the foreign objects in the body, and also no point of entry. This is an incredible point to really stress right now, because this is impossible.
Right. How did it get in your leg?
I was just thinking about that same doctor when I was just looking at that too.
I'm not surprised, Jamie. Yeah, we let's never forget Dr. Roger Lear and the great work that he's done.
I'm hoping somebody takes his place, because we need more research into this. But go ahead, Terry.
Yeah. As I said, seeing this thing freaked me out. It brought back memories, and it brought back nightmares. Not right away, but a couple weeks down the road, I couldn't get it off my mind, and I would wake up screaming again, like I used to, and this was just once a week, then twice a week, and they played out kind of sequentially, and I started to journal them again, and eventually, in 2014, about 2 years later, I made the decision that I want to write about this. I want to speak about this. I think people should know that there's something out there. Because I talked to a lot of people. No one could give me an explanation of how the thing got in my knee or what it was. So I spoke at a UFO convention in Houston in 2017. And I met the Kling brothers, who do a lot of ghost stuff. And they asked me if I'd like to come and sit for an interview with them, get me on videotape. And I said, sure. So January of 2018, I guess, I was in their home where they have a little studio set up. And we were taping. We had just finished the segment. We were done for the evening. And I had a little mic on my lapel, and it fell in my lap. And when it hit my lap, the Barry Kling, who was working as the sound guy, kind of pushes his hands over his headphones and presses them close to his head and kind of says, shh, and hushes everyone. And instinctively, I picked up the thing off my lap, and I laid it on top of my knee. And he said, that's it. He says, I can hear music. Wow. And then he said, it's mariachi music. And it was a radio station from Mexico. Now, I'm not a sound guy. I'm not a radio guy. I don't know. But they told me, there was no way, without my knee broadcasting a signal, there was no way that they could have picked that up. So, just an idea of how strange it truly is.
What's so, it's just, well, Heather,
impossible. It's just absolutely impossible, Jason. I want a scientist to come and give us an earthly explanation for what Terry has said. But
didn't Roger Lear, he had some of these implants do that? I remember in interviews.
Researcher, I sure hope I get his name right, Leo Sprinkle. He also found that implants would be transmitting a signal on a specific frequency. Dr. Roger Lear also discovered this, yes.
Yeah, why a Mexican radio station? That's
have
so
no idea.
out there. You know, maybe
I
the
don't
aliens
know.
are tuning into it.
Well, in this case, this is very strange because the device is picking up and then resending it rather than sending out its own unique transmission.
Yeah.
So I find that very strange.
Exactly. It has to do both functions. It has to receive and then retransmit. I'm just glad that they had a video camera rolling at the time and got it all on tape.
This was Strange Curiosities, right? This is one of their documentaries, right?
Yes, it's not out yet.
Okay.
It's kind of.
I
in
was
the
looking
works,
for
but-
I was looking for it after I had heard that in the interview with Heather. I was looking for it, so it's not out yet, but it will.
It will be. Yes.
Oh, something I'm definitely going to watch. I cannot wait.
Well, where I'd like to go from here is I had some childhood experiences I'd like to talk about. I had two in particular. One happened in 1963, and I was an 8-year-old. And in my room, my bed was in a corner with a wall on both sides of me, and kept my door closed. And one night I woke up and there was like a twirl of shadows in the room. And and this is going to sound, I know, but this is going to sound way out there, but this is what happened. 4 little monkeys, stepped out of the shadows and formed a semicircle around my bed. And the one closest to my head spoke to me. Now, it gets weirder. They had bright yellow eyes, and they all wore a white mask with like a mouth just painted as a slit. And when it spoke to me, I heard it in my head. I mean, as clear as anything, any word audibly spoken, I heard it crystal clear in my head, but its lips never moved. And it would say, "Terry, come play with us. Come on, play with us, and we'll take you back before daylight. We'll take you back." And I wasn't frightened this time. And I'm thinking, it felt familiar. And I'm thinking, have I gone with these people before? You know, I've been warned against going with strangers.
Especially 4 strange monkeys, right? You know, that would
Yeah.
be terrifying.
And, you know, I screamed bloody murder for my parents to come. And these went on for, oh God, several weeks. A nightmare that I have that still haunts me to this day is that I recall as a child in bed seeing the monkey closest to my head would always hold out a monkey paw for me to take. And in this nightmare, it's not a paw, it's 4 long fingers. And when I see that in my mind's eye in my dream, I just lose it. I just lose it.
Do the fingers look the same as a monkey paw, or do they look a little bit different, Terry?
Oh, they were totally different.
How different? Can you describe them to us?
Sure. A monkey paw looked like it kind of is similar to a human hand,
Right.
and hairy, and small. This hand that I see was much larger, and the fingers were longer, probably 6 inches in length. It's difficult to tell. I was a child.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't see a thumb, but I did see 4 long fingers. And that absolutely just I still dream about that today.
And they didn't look human fingers, right? Did they have fingernails or not the color of human skin or anything like that?
No, they had a grayish pallor to them and sparse hair over them and some wrinkles. But it was definitely not a human hand.
So this was letting you know that the monkeys were an illusion. Did you put that much of it together at that moment?
Well, you know, I didn't have the dreams about the monkey paw being actually a hand.
Mm-hmm.
Those happened actually years later.
Okay. Okay.
So at the time, I thought, I tried to explain to my parents, look, this is real. And I mean, they knew me. I mean, I was a straight kid. I didn't tell lies. I didn't, and my folks just would not listen to me. At this same time, I'm in my backyard, and I'm playing with an adult bow and arrow set, something I'd never give my kids when they were 8.
You'll shoot your arrow.
Yeah, I'm in a semi-urban area, St. Louis City, and I'm shooting these arrows into a bale of hay. And as I'm looking down, I'm loading an arrow into the notch of the bow. And as I'm doing so, I see this circular shadow, and it was a cloudless day. Circular shadow move across my feet. And instinctively, I looked straight up, and over my head was a classic flying saucer. And I was awestruck. It was, at the time, it was beautiful. I don't know how to explain it. It was, in the way that we think like a new sports car is sexy or cool, in that regard, it was just an awesome experience. And I dropped my bow and arrow, and I'm looking at this thing, and I'm thinking, even at 8, I had a pretty good idea how things were assembled. And I'm thinking, well, there has to be a portal for wheels to come down. There should be, USAF on it somewhere, or rivets or something. But no, it was absolutely seamless, and it curled up on the corners. It wobbled a little bit in the breeze. It was about 30 or 40 feet over my head. I estimate its size to be a good 30 feet in diameter. And the strangest thing, there was a distinct audible change in this neighborhood full of dogs and cars and kids playing. Sound was muffled. It felt like I had my hands over my ears. And I got that ionized air ozone smell, like after a thunderstorm. Mm-hmm. And I had, for some reason, the urge to lie down on the ground and look up at it. And I thought, I'll get a better look at it if I lie down and just look up. And that makes no sense at all. But that's what I did. I laid down in the grass, and I looked up at this thing. And I don't know for how long. I'm no less than 5 minutes, no more than 20. Then it listed to one side and shot off from 0 to 500 miles an hour. As I said, it was a cloudless day and left a hole in the sky. I mean, no, visually you couldn't see a hole, but on my mind and with my eyes, I saw the point where it vanished, and that's where my eyes were fixated. Yeah, I didn't realize I was screaming until later when my mother ran out and tried to calm me down. She's like, "Oh my God, neighbors are going to think you've lost your mind. What is wrong with you?" I said, "Mom, did you see it? It was so cool. Did you see it, Mom?" And she's like, "Let's get you in the house." She drags me in the house, sits me down, and says, "Now, what's all this about?" And I said, "It's about a flying saucer. I saw a flying saucer." And she said, "Now, Terry, I know you may have seen something, but it was a jet."
Yeah, here we go.
Right.
I don't know what you saw, but I know it was not a flying saucer. And she went so far as to get, the family 1-volume encyclopedia that we owned, and we had to look up dirigibles and balloons, and I'm nope, fighter jets and biplanes, nope. And finally, she hands me a pen and paper and says, "Draw what you saw." Sure. And I drew a perfect circle. I said, "That's what I saw." and she was she was upset by that. And my dad got home. He wasn't happy about that either. And I learned pretty quick as a kid that if I see something, I'm not telling a soul. And that was my last experience until 3 years later. It was 1966. I was 11 years old. It was in my room on the second floor in the front of the house, and it was a bitter cold evening in January. And I remember all the Christmas lights had been put away. And I woke up, and when I woke up, I was sitting upright in bed. And my room was lit up like a baseball stadium at a night game. It was just, but flashes. It was yellow, greenish, and white lights mostly. And they would vary in intensity and flashes, no particular rhythm about it, and lit the room up enough to cast long shadows. And at the same time, there was a droning sound. I call it a droning sound. It felt, if you've ever been next to a train locomotive or a large piece of equipment, it has that power to it. Not so much loud, but it was like a bass note.
Vibration that you could feel?
Yes, like a bass vibration in my chest.
And what were you thinking at this moment? Was there anything going through your mind as far as what can this possibly be? Why is there a light in my room? Why is this happening right now? Were you scared? What was going on through your head?
I was not the least bit frightened. Again, this makes no sense. I was just mildly interested. I mean, I would describe my mood as borderline apathetic.
Strange.
And I swung my feet over the edge of the bed and put on my slippers, and I walked to the window. And the lights are so bright that it's hurting my eyes. And I pulled back the curtains, and there's another flying saucer. And it's 2 feet outside my window.
Wow.
And there's a dome on top. And the dome is where the lights are coming from. And it was so intense, I couldn't look at this dome. And all I remember thinking is, wow, how cool, I got a chance to see the top of it. And I took the curtain and I tucked it into the Venetian blinds so I could have a hands-free look at this thing. And I watched it for a minute or two, and then that was it. With it out there, with the droning sound still going on, I turned and walked back to my bed, got in bed with all this going on, and went soundly asleep.
That's incredible.
Certainly. Yeah, it makes you think of what a lot of abductees or contactees talk about when they say, I was switched off, or my mind wasn't there, or I wasn't myself. They talk about this sort of mind control that instantly happens upon contact.
Actually, I have Heather, I don't know if you remember, Whitley Strieber had something similar he remembered back from his child. I think it was Whitley. I might be wrong. I think he was with his father, and they just laid down in a field. I don't know if that was Whitley or not, but it was very similar to the story about how you laid down in the field and saw the UFO, and that they just kind of just lay down and look at it and got very apathetic about it.
Yeah, I absolutely disinterest. I mean, it wasn't an appropriate response. But I when I lay down, I went immediately asleep, and I woke up to a normal day. And I didn't think about it. And I put my shoes on and I turned to the window and I saw that curtain that I had tucked into the Venetian blind. And then I knew. And it all came back in a flood. And I thought, that's pretty cool. but there was a little bit of fear.
Yeah.
This time that I didn't experience the first time.
Did you ever associate that with the monkeys that you had seen when you were 8 at that time? Did anything cross your mind about that?
No, it didn't. I always thought they were two separate events.
Right.
I saw flying saucers, and I saw, 4 circus monkeys in my room, and didn't talk about either.
Did you have a thought in your mind at all? Extraterrestrials are real, and why aren't people talking about this? Did any of that go through your head? I understand you were 11, but
It did. And, it was a major epiphany for me in that I'm looking at this thing and I'm thinking, this is a piece of machinery. This had to be put together somewhere.
Mhm.
And I didn't see CCCP on it. And it wasn't USAF. So I thought this thing's probably from Mars. My limited knowledge of the universe and the plants, I thought, I bet it's from Mars.
did you have an urge to tell people, even maybe your friends at school or anybody?
No, I didn't. But what I did have was this unbelievable curiosity, because I kept taking it a step further and thinking this thing had to be put together somewhere, so there must be a factory on Mars. And if there's a factory on Mars, there've got to be people that go to work, like my dad. They carry their lunchbox. They go to work every day. And in the evening, they have to come back to a home on Mars and a family and eat dinner and maybe watch TV. And it was just almost too much for my head to handle at 11.
I can certainly imagine that, yes. It had to have been an overwhelming feeling. And did you feel like you were walking around with this great big secret? Or?
Yeah, I did. I did feel like I had a secret.
That you knew something that other people didn't know.
Yeah, I kind of felt special.
Right.
I kind of felt like, there was a cartoon show, and there was this standing joke, make a wrong turn at Albuquerque.
Mm-hmm.
And when the second one happened, that's what I thought of. I thought, this wasn't a wrong turn in Albuquerque. This was here to see me. This was here for a reason. And that was pretty intense feeling. And I had nightmares for a few weeks afterward. Not nearly as long a stretch as I had after the monkeys in my room, but those faded and went away. And I was fortunate to enjoy, normal adolescence. Graduated from high school. My wife and I married. Sheila, who I mentioned in the book, we're still married. And I joined the Air Force in 1973, not out of any sense of nationalism or pride, but for the GI Bill. I wanted the education benefits because I wanted a college education. So I was a medic. I was trained as a medic and an EMT, stationed at Whiteman Air Force Base. And Whiteman is in western Missouri, east and a little south of Kansas City. Now, back in 1977, there was absolutely nothing there. It was all farmland and virgin forest and a spattering of missile silos. Whiteman was home to the 351st Strategic Missile Wing, and there was a squadron of Minuteman II missiles, and they were deployed, spread out in these farm fields and in these woods and these various areas. So there's no way they could make a direct hit and take out all of these missiles at once. It would ensure that some would survive and be able to hit their target. And I had a partner at the time. I refer to him as Tobias in the book. And Tobias and I were close friends, and we worked together. And whenever there was a need, somebody got hurt, somebody fell in a missile silo, or, got hurt fixing an airplane, or had a heart attack or something, we would be dispatched. We'd go out and retrieve them, bring them back to the hospital for treatment. We were the only two guys. We were known as kind of the nerds in the squad. We were the only two guys amenable to work in the night shift. I did it because I could take evening classes. It would fit my schedule. And Tobias did it because he was absolutely in love with the night sky. And I recall, on nice spring and summer evenings, we'd leave the door open so we could hear the phone, the crash phone, and we'd sit outside and look at the stars, and he could point out different constellations, satellites that would come across. And he was a bright kid. He was a really bright kid. There was an extension university on campus, and his dream was to go to University of Michigan and get a degree in either astronomy or physics. And they offered 3 physics classes. He took all 3 and aced them, and then there was nothing else he could take that would transfer, so he was done. And we had just a great working relationship and became the closest of friends. And one night, 1975, there was a call for us to report to Kilo 5, which is a designation of one of these missile silos. And I believe you have a photograph of that.
Yes, we should. I didn't title that, but Jeff, there's a picture, hold on, of a missile silo on there. If you want to bring that up.
It
Go
looks
ahead,
like
Terry.
there's not much to see. It's just an open field with a chain link fence around it. And a trapezoid-shaped concrete cinder block building with a door. And when you open it, there's a very small office and an elevator with one button down. And
It's image
that
2, Jeff. Should say image 2. Yep.
there we go. That's Kilo 5. If you see right in the center, I don't know if you can see the color blue or not, but right in the center, you'll see a hump kind of thing between the 2 telephone poles. That's the cap on top of the ICBM. And that little trapezoid building over there is where the missile technicians would go down and through a tunnel, and they could access the missile. So we got a call that night, late in the night, that some guy had slipped and fallen inside the silo, and we were dispatched. And we had our routine. I drove, and Toby navigated, and we had a contraband radio, and we took turns on every run. It was Toby's turn, so he wanted to play Commodores. So I had my turn. I played Rolling Stones. And we took turns back and forth, and it was serious, but when you're 22 years old, it was a lot of fun. Because this ambulance had lights and the siren. I didn't use the siren because it hurt my head. But we turned the music up, and just fly. And as we're on our way, we are probably 1.5 miles away, and there's this weird orange glow over the sky, like an orange cloud. And at about the 1 mile point, there's a roadblock and 2 security police cars parked in a V shape to block traffic from either direction. And it was cold. It was bitterly cold. I don't know how cold it was, but it was in the teens or lower. And there was a stiff wind. And I'm sure these guys were supposed to be standing outside their car, but they were inside with the heat on and the windows rolled up. So I roll my window down and get the guy's attention. And he says, "Yeah, I'll back up the car." And I said, "Hey, what's going on?" And he said, "I don't have a clue. I have no idea." Because normally when an accident like this would happen, it would be usual for them to send maybe one car with a couple of guys for security reasons to escort us into the restricted area where that little trapezoid building is so we could retrieve our patient. But what we were seeing, as we got close, we could see what it was. It was the overhead flashing lights, about a dozen, about 10 security police cars with their lights flashing, and they were all flashing out of sync. So it made, with the mixture of the very cold air with the exhaust fumes from all the cars, it made this big orange cloud. And there was a captain standing in the middle of the road, in a radio in his hand, and I rolled up, and I rolled my window down, and he said, "Park it over there. Your guy's alive. He's walking, he's talking, he's breathing. You'll get him when I say so, but for right now, nobody goes in, nobody comes out. Park it over there. Stay off the radio." So, he wasn't taking questions. So pulled over. I stopped, and we kept the engine running, and the windows inside were frosted over pretty bad, so we couldn't see what was going on. We were facing the opposite direction anyway. Had Toby, who was always kind of impulsive one, says, "Man, I'm going to check it out." I'm like, "Toby, captain said don't go out there. I mean, I wouldn't violate his order, And he said, "No, man, I'm going to see this. I want to find out." He said, I'm just going to snoop around. I'll be right back." So he throws on his parka and he leaves the ambulance. And about 3 minutes later, he comes and he yanks my door open and he grabs me by my left shoulder and starts pulling me out of the ambulance. And he's excited. I mean, excited is an understatement. And he said, "Man, you have got to see this. You ain't never seen nothing like that. You have got to see this." And he's pulling me up, and I grab my parka, I throw it on, and I walk out with him. And we're standing right next to the captain, and he's looking up in the air. And I look up, and directly over Kilo 5, directly over where that blue dome sits, where the missile is housed, there was a diamond-shaped black thing about the size of a full-size cargo van. And I didn't know it at the time, but evidently nuclear Air Force Base facilities are very common places for UFOs.
We're gonna go to commercial break. We're gonna hang it there. We're going to get back to this sighting. For people watching on Facebook, remember, it goes quiet for a little bit because we play music on Late Night in the Midlands Radio Network that you cannot hear because Facebook wouldn't like that. But we will be back with our guest, Terry Lovelace, and our special co-host, Heather Wade, returning from the Kingdom of Nye, October 1st. I cannot wait. All right, guys, back with you in just a few minutes.
Late Night in the Midlands Radio and Midwest Paranormal presents Paranormal Soup with your host, Jason Blair.
Tonight's guest is Terry Lovelace, author of Incident at Devil's Den. We're talking about his UFO abductions experiences, the implants in his knees. This is one of the most incredible abduction stories I've read. We're going to get to the story of what happened at Devil's Den. There's a lot to it. But man, it is one of those books that I told you before. It really made me look deeply at my own experiences. And remember, guys, we got Heather Wade tonight as a co-host with us. She's going to be jumping in. She knows Terry very well. She helped me get him as a guest. And I love being able to hang out with her and discuss these subjects. It's so awesome. So let's get back to our guests. All right, you still there with me, Terry? Oh, you got to unmute yourself. There we go.
There we go.
There we go. There we go.
So you were at the military base with Tobias, and you see this. You said it was diamond shaped, kind of in the air.
It was, I called it a diamond. Toby took a pen and paper and drew a picture of it. And it was faceted like a diamond in that it was cut. It was about the size of a cargo van, as I said, but it didn't have rounded edges. All the edges were sharp, and there were panels all around, and it was matte black. And it was just the most incredible thing, because when I first saw it, I'm looking for cables or something to hold it up. I mean, the mind it's hard to register what you're seeing. And I'm watching it for maybe 30 seconds. And then flash, it's gone. It flies away. Zero to 500 miles an hour.
Wow.
In a second. And it's gone, and the three of us are standing there. And his captain turns and he looks at me, and he's got this big smile on his face, and it was like, man, did you see what I saw? And then, pretty quick, we respectively got back on our roles, and he's like, go ahead, get back in your ambulance. And we took care of business. And, interesting. We grabbed the patient, who was a missile technician, who was working on some missile maintenance, and he fell inside the silo. And
Poor guy.
I fell far. They had him, the captain had him sitting in this trapezoid building with no windows, with his foot propped up. He broke his ankle, foot propped up on a trash can. And all he can hear is, 30 guys with M16s running around and chaos outside. And he doesn't have a clue what's going on.
Poor guy.
Yeah, poor guy. All the way back in the ambulance, he's like, you got to tell me what happened, what I missed. And we told him everything. And it was odd. We got back, and our commander, squadron commander, was there waiting to talk to us. By this time, it's early in the morning, 4:30, 5-ish. And he was a cool guy. And he said, come on down to my office, boys. I want to talk to you. And we went down, and he invited us into his office, said, have a seat. And he said, all right, boys, what happened out there? And we took turns, and we told him everything we saw. And he's like, he took some notes, and he's like, tell me again. And I did, and we told him a second time. And he asked to see my report, because I had to write a report as the senior on that night. And he took my report, and what you wanted to make sure, he said, did you write a clean report? I knew what he was referencing. Did I make any mention of this thing in my report? And of course I didn't. I knew better than that. And he took my report anyway, and all it had in it was the pertinent times that I left, arrived, departure, back. He took the report over to a copy machine and burned a couple copies. And before that, he burned one copy, took a black magic marker and blacked out all of the dates, times, all of the relevant times.
Like when you went and left and picked him up and all that?
Yep, correct. The time we departed, the time we arrived, the time we picked up our patient, all of those times he ran a black magic marker through. He kept the original and gave us one, a photocopy with the times marked out, and said, turn this in, you'll have no problem with it. And he says, can you draw what you saw? And, Toby was like, yeah, I counted the facets.
Wow.
And that's what I would expect him to do, And because he did that, he was able to give a pretty decent representation of what this thing looked like. And I had a copy that I kept for years, and it somehow got lost, and I wish I could find it. But I had a copy, and we wound up with, he said, okay, boys, I want you to know what you saw was a helicopter prototype, okay?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Yes, sir.
And he might as well have winked at us, you know. And he says, "Now look, you're smart guys. You know, don't go running your mouths. I know you do the right thing." So I couldn't wait to get home and tell my wife. I mean, we were talking like auctioneers. We couldn't say enough. I mean, not to anybody outside a very small circle of people, but yeah, it was interesting. Um,
Well, I'm thinking about what the commanding officer asked, did to the paperwork. He took the
Me too.
times off of the paperwork, and I'm wondering if that wasn't in order to prevent corroboration, because what if there was a civilian who took a photograph of the object, or what if there was a civilian who took a video? Well, back in those times, it'd probably been a photograph, maybe.
Right.
And so you would have then been able to corroborate the times had there been official paperwork with those times, and then a person like a UFO investigator would be able to say, well, this photograph, this object was seen at this location at this time. And if there's official paperwork that corroborates that there were individuals at that location at that time, then those individuals would be, well, culpable. Well, they'd be, they would not be able to deny that there was a UFO there.
yeah, that would keep everything secret except the date. So
Yes.
See, I wondered about that when I read that in the book. I'm like, why would he cross? What would be so important about the times? And, that's a brilliant idea, Heather, why they would do that.
Well, this stuff has to be kept under wraps.
but when as we're walking out of the building, this poor guy that had his ankle broken is seated in the treatment room, and he's getting grilled by an OSI. I think he was a security police captain. I don't think he was OSI, and two uniformed cops asking him a bunch of questions, and he's the only guy who didn't see anything. So, but that's kind of the military for you.
Were they asking questions about the accident, probably how he fell and all that?
Oh yeah, everything.
We're just going to ignore the 30 soldiers out there with the M16s and the UFO thing. We're going to talk to the guy that got injured and keep any of that out of our reports.
That's crazy. I mean, I would have thought they'd talk to us, but no, not to us. Fine with me. So, what happened next is nothing. For about 2 years, in late spring of 1977, Toby said to me, he says, "Hey man, let's go camping." And I thought he was kidding. I'm like, "Toby, what are you talking about?" He says, "Man, let's go camping. It'll be a lot of fun." And I said, "Toby, we're city kids. Neither one of us had ever been camping in our lives. He was from Flint. I was from St. Louis. But he said, just think about it." And I did think about it. And pretty soon it was about all I could think about. And I had a camera. I had a new 35 millimeter camera, and I had a dark room set up in my house where I could develop black and white film. But and I lived in NCO housing on the base, and when you live on a nuclear missile base, there's not a lot that you can walk around with a camera and take pictures of. It's kind of frowned upon. So
Makes
Especially
sense.
A nuclear facility, base that has nuclear missiles. Yeah, I'm sure it's really frowned upon.
yeah. So he's like, we can go and you can photograph wildlife. He says, I can look at the night sky without any light pollution. And he said, it would be a lot of fun. And, there were half a dozen parks within 5 or 10 miles of us. And he says, we got to go to this place. This is called Devil's Den. And it's down just across the border. Like across a border, you drive halfway across the state. And he's like, yeah, but you look at this. He says, this place has these rock ledges. And he says, they got eagles like crazy. Because he knew I like to photograph eagles and wildlife. And he said, man, this has got to be the place to go. And he made a pretty good argument. And he said, if you're going to go camping, go in the wilderness. He says, otherwise, you might as well sit in a parking lot in the woods.
That's how I felt about camping, too.
yeah, he's got a point. So I said, finally, I caved and I said, sure, let's go. And we planned the trip for June. And again, it was all I could think about. I won't say that I was obsessed with it, but I was pretty close. And he was the same. We, having never been camping before, we did what two nerds would do. We decided we'd go to the library and find out how to go camping. And we found a 1956 Boy Scout manual. It was of no help. We weren't going to be tying any nautical knots or doing taxidermy or anything. So we really didn't have a lot of guidance. But Toby had this saying, man, it ain't rocket science. And it kind of became a joke between the two of us. So we went to a big store, bought a little tent, a couple of inflatable air mattresses, swiped a couple blankets from the hospital. We're going to get them back, but we're just going to use them. Had a military strength DEET and sunscreen. And, we had made this long, complex list of all these things to bring. And we divided them up. And I bought some special film. I bought some infrared film and some special black and white film for use in low light conditions. And we packed up the car. It was 5:30 a.m. and we left, said goodbye, hit the road, and we were just on top of the world. And, windows are down, radio's turned up, and I'm like, you're right, Tobe, this is a great idea, man. And we're just sailing down the road. And the thought crosses my mind, is my camera on my kitchen counter? And I hit the steering wheel with my hand and I said, Toby, I left the camera sitting in the kitchen. And he said, no, man, no way, dude. It's in the trunk. Pull this thing over. So we did. We pulled over. We pulled everything out of the trunk. And of course, it wasn't there. It was on my kitchen table where I left it. But there were a couple of things about this trip that, we just weren't that inept. It just didn't make sense. Like I said, we were smarter than this. I don't understand it.
So there was something strange, a strange feel about this trip from the beginning.
From the beginning. The obsessive thoughts about it. The way we approached it was all wrong. Toby forgot half the things on his list. Luckily, he remembered the hot dogs. So we had
Gotta
enough.
have the hot dogs. Gotta have the hot
Gotta
dogs.
have those.
Yeah, cinders is what they turned out to be. But we had.
I'm curious also in that you say you were, borderline obsessed about this trip, the both of you. Was there, can you put anything on the anticipation? Clearly you were anticipating the trip, but did you expect something, or did you know that this was going to be sort of an event in your life, or were you just plain old excited about a trip out of the house?
Kind of plain old excited about a trip, but in my mind's eye, I had conjured up this image of eagles with 12-foot wingspans and, photographing them and scenic views of the countryside, deer standing in fields and, all this cool stuff. And I was really obsessed with the thing.
But you had no idea what you were about to walk into and how this event was going to change your life forever.
It changed both our lives forever.
And made forgetting your camera even more painful.
That would cause unbelievable pain.
Yes. No
we were
kidding.
already 3 hours into it. So, there's no way we're going to turn around, drive 3 hours, and then 3 hours back just to get where we were.
Mm-hmm.
So we decided, make this a trip to reconnoiter, go down, check it out.
And you know, you don't. One of the things I love about your book is you don't speculate a lot. You really don't. You really stick to the story. But I'm a speculator. I'm a dreamer, and I have a wild imagination. But you do wonder, and I think you were kind of getting at that too, Heather. Is like, was he programmed to forget like the camera? You know.
Possibly. That did cross my mind.
Yeah.
But I just wondered because oftentimes with contactees and experiencers will hear that they have this incredible anticipation right before a major event. And I've always been very curious, you know, do they know anything about the event that's about to happen? Usually they don't. And I find that unusual. They're just compelled to go someplace.
Well,
It's
we
like-
certainly had that anticipation for, you know, good, especially the last 3 days. We were just psyched.
Interesting. Very interesting. But also, you know, absent-minded, which is unusual for the both of you. And Toby, by the way, everybody listening to this program tonight, you will probably, by the time Terry is done, never, ever forget Toby. I know I certainly have not. I've never met the man. I've never even seen a picture of Tobias, but I got a special place in my heart for him. And I think listeners tonight will also, like I said, by the time Terry is done here, I mean, we are starting to get into, if what you've heard so far hasn't absolutely knocked you back in your chair, what you're about to hear will.
Exactly. And let's cut to commercial. That's a perfect break from the pro herself. For people watching on Facebook, we do play music out the Late Night in the Midlands radio network that you cannot hear. When we come back, we're going to get into Incident at Devil's Den. What happened there? Sounded like a good idea at the time, right, Terry?
At the time.
At the time. All right, guys. Like I said, when we come back, we're going to continue this story, Incident at Devil's Den, with Terry Lovelace and our special co-host tonight, Heather Wade, Return of the Kingdom of Nye, October 1st. I cannot wait. All right, we'll be back in just a few minutes.
Switch to DCS ranging.
240, nominal to profile.
We're in the pipe. 5 by 5.
Tonight, our guest is Terry Lovelace, author of Incident at Devil's Den. We're getting deep into this story now. This is to me, this is the crucial part right here, so pay attention. These kind of things that happen to people, they do scar them, but they don't remember. Even as incredible as this is, Terry still didn't believe he was an alien abductee until later. You push it out of your mind. This is the kind of story, when I read it, that really stuck with me because of what he's about to tell. And our co-host, Heather Wade, she's had Terry on several times. I thank you again, Heather, for bringing him on this show tonight because I really want people to hear this story tonight because it's important. Because these things are happening to people and have been happening to people and they're still happening to people. And the world needs to take notice and be aware of these stories. So let's get back to our guest.
That's absolutely right, Jason. And by the way, thank you very much for allowing me to join you tonight. This is fantastic.
It is a true honor, Heather, to have you on here to talk about it because you know you've interviewed Terry several times. You have the insight in that. I read the book; it was enthralled about it. But you know what you're adding to this show tonight. Thank you so much.
Hey, it is mutual, Jason.
So Terry,
Yes.
let's continue.
I was crestfallen. I mean, photography was kind of the whole purpose of this exercise, and you know, Toby, God bless him, did his best to lift my spirits. You know, I decided, you know, I'm going to be an adult about this and just roll with it. And like he said, we'll reconnoiter, we'll make another trip. And there was another odd thing in that I had planned on buying a camper. I was going to look for used campers when we got back and buying camping gear. And I could see in my mind's eye this lifetime of camping. And I didn't know it was the first and last time in my life I'd ever be camping. And we rode across the Arkansas border, and Devil's Den is on the west side, and a road cuts through, and then there's Ozark National Forest on the east side. And we'd already decided we didn't want to stay in the campgrounds. You know, we didn't. like Toby's analogy, you know, like camping in a parking lot in the woods. So we decided we were going to number one, skirt the Rangers, and number two, find a back road and go someplace and find someplace that, is off the beaten path.
Okay.
And we did. My old Chevy Impala, we drove. We stopped long enough at the visitor center for Toby to grab a map, and that was invaluable. And I drove and drove. And what's odd is it's like Toby says, like, go this way, go this way. And it was almost like he knew where we were going. I mean, it sounds crazy. I know, and I'll get to that later. We came to a chain across the road, and it was, no trespassing, Arkansas State Department of Parks and Recreation, something like that. And Toby hops out of the car, and the chain's locked, but it's locked in a loop and just draped over a post. So he just picks it up and drops it. It falls to the ground, chink, and hops back in the car, and we drive through. And we drove, and we drove, and we were on a steady plane going up. I wanted to be someplace high. And I asked Toby, I said, Toby, I know you got a great sense of direction, man, but you ought to be making some notes and make yourself a map so we don't get lost out here. And he went in the glove box, found a pencil and a bank receipt, and made a map of where we were going. And we would need that shortly. We took a long ride up and made a right turn, and there was this meadow full of late blooming wildflowers, and it was horseshoe shaped with woods all around, and then a real rocky area at the end. And it was absolutely beautiful. And we were both like, oh man, this has got to be the place. And I wanted to set up camp in the middle of the meadow, with the meadow all around us. And Toby's like, no, man, we can't do that. We can set up by this tree line over here. And in most arguments, Toby caved most of the time. But this time, he was insistent that we park near this tree line. And so we did. And we set up a camp, and, well, actually, we didn't. Toby wanted to set up a camp, and I said, look, I've been driving for over 6 hours. I want to stretch my legs, man. Let's go for a little hike. And then when we get back, we'll hustle, we'll set up camp, right? So we go out, and we go walking to the edge of the open edge of the horseshoe where the rocks are, went down, crossed a couple creeks, and just beautiful scenery. And there was a rocky ledge that we climbed upon, limestone outcropping with a flat area on top and a canopy of trees over it. And we both just kind of sat back. It was a hot day too. It was 90 degrees. It was hot for that early in the year. And we had a gallon of water we split between us. And we just kind of kicked back and we're laying on this rock talking. And neither one of us ever thought that we'd fall asleep. I mean, when I was 22, taking a nap was impossible. I absolutely not a thing I would do.
Well, you might miss something, Terry.
Absolutely. 22, geez. But incredibly, that's what we did. We both fell asleep.
Yeah, I've always found that really weird.
Me too. And you were just on the rock, just laying on the rock, right?
Yes, we were laying on this limestone outcropping because the rock was cool to the touch, and we had that canopy of leaves over our heads. So I was deep in dreamland, and I woke up to Toby kicking me and screaming, "Get up!" with expletives. And before I even opened my eyes, I knew what we'd done. And he said, "Man, we have got to get back. because it was getting on to sunset. And the last thing we wanted to do was be stuck in a forest at night. So I wanted to go take one direction back. Toby wanted to take another. And fortunately, I listened to Toby because I knew he had an unerring sense of direction. And he got us back to the campground, to the campsite, our campsite, right as twilight set in.
That's scary enough, being in the woods and not sure exactly where you are.
No,
And it's getting
I know
dark.
that feeling.
Yeah,
Yes,
me
yes.
too.
When that sun starts to go down and you realize, oh, wait a minute, I am actually in the wilderness. I need to get back to civilization.
Yeah, we were terrified. We actually talked about it and decided if we had to spend the night in the woods, we could survive that. But it'd be a miserable night.
Yeah.
So we saw the car at the end of the meadow and sprinted the last 100 yards or whatever it was, got to the car and started putting together a campsite, which according to Tobias, wasn't rocket science. Well, you know.
Famous last words.
Oh, I left a camp lantern, a hatchet, just an assortment of things I left sitting in my garage. So
My God.
we were light, we didn't have everything we needed. So Toby set up the camp and I went out and gathered as much firewood as I could, which turned out to be mostly leaves, twigs, and small branches. And but I made a little campfire, and we did all the things you do camping. We roasted some hot dogs. We had a 6-pack of beer, and we had a beer or two apiece. And it's getting kind of late in the evening, and we're both tired. And I don't know why we were tired, because we had this 3.5-hour unscheduled nap. And but I felt just drained.
Also very strange for a couple of young guys.
Right.
Toby admitted to feeling the same way. And we were kicked back on our air mattresses, and I noticed that the place was silent. Like an hour before, there were these tree frogs and crickets you could hear, and the place was noisy almost.
Mosquitoes.
Mosquitoes, yeah. And a breeze, and it was dead still. Not a leaf was moving, and there wasn't a sound to be heard. No tree frogs, no crickets, no nothing. And I said, Toby, is that normal? And he's like, yeah, man, look, we've been laughing and cutting up. They'll be back. Give them an hour. They'll be back. And I remembered those words. And we were kicked back on the air mattresses, and we were discussing going to sleep when Toby turned his head to the left, to the west, and said, hey, man, were those there before? And I'm like, what? What are you talking about? And he says, look on the horizon there. And I turned my head and looked, and sure enough, I saw what he was talking about. On the horizon were 3 bright stars. And they formed a perfect little triangle. And they sat stationary right on the horizon. And we're watching these things, and we both knew a thing or two about aircraft. And we both knew that there were no aircraft that had a triangular shaped flight configuration. None that we were aware of anyway. And the distance was off. We couldn't tell if these things were close or if they were very distant. And while we're debating this, they move. And they rotated like they were on an axis and did about a 3/4 turn and then stopped. And we're excited. Toby's like, hey, did you see that? And I'm like, yeah, oh my God, look at this thing. What's it doing? And it starts a slow ascent straight up. And we kind of calm down a little bit. And we're watching this thing, and it's moving slowly at first.
Calmed down.
Yeah.
And your reactions through this whole thing just seem so odd. You're excited one second watching something that you've never seen in the skies before. And then when it starts to ascend, which would be the moment that I start calling people, you calm down.
It was a paradox. It's exactly the opposite of what it should have been.
It's like when you were 11 in your bedroom. And you saw a
Exactly
UFO.
like that.
Yeah.
Exactly like that.
Mm-hmm.
And we lay there, and there wasn't, but a few words spoken between us. And I asked Toby, I said, "Hey, man, are you scared?" And he said, "No, I'm not scared. You scared?" I'm like, "No." And I wasn't. And we're watching this thing because as it gets higher into the sky, these 3 points of light, they remain equidistant to one another and expand. And it was a beautiful night. And there were a trillion stars with no light pollution. And we could see that the area inside the triangle was jet black, while the area outside the triangle was blue sky. And as it moved, we saw it pass over a field of stars. They'd blink out and then blink back on once the thing had passed. And I recall Toby saying, "I think it's headed in our direction." And I said, "Yeah, I think so." And we watched it, and it grew bigger and bigger and bigger, and it was enormous. It was over our heads, and it was, I would estimate, a city block on each of the 3 legs of the triangle. And it was deep. It was 5 stories deep. This thing was as big as a 5-story office building.
Massive. Absolutely massive. I mean, it's hard for me, really, Terry, and it always has been. Every time I hear your story, it's almost hard for my mind to grasp just how large we're talking about here.
If you look at the picture that I drew a picture about 8 months after the fact,
Mm-hmm.
and I tried to draw it to scale. And Jason, I think I sent you a copy.
Yeah.
You may have.
It should be in the
And
file, Jeff.
If you look at
Yep.
that, if you look in the lower left corner, you'll see my Chevy Impala and Toby and I. And I'm not even sure that's the size or to scale,
Right.
but that'll give you an idea of what this thing looked like. And there were windows all over the place. And if you're in a downtown area, in an office building at 2 a.m., some of the lights here and there are on.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what it was like.
Mm-hmm.
And where the light panels, windows, were lit, it was a brilliant light, very bright, shining out. And at the top was what I refer to as an observation deck, because it was a long expanse and it was all lit up on top. And on each point of the triangle, there was a light bar that ran from the very top to the very bottom, all five stories tall. And the lights would run up and down it. And I think that's what made, in the night sky, that's what made it twinkle and give the illusion that it was a star. And this thing
Maybe on
was
purpose.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, Terry, I don't want to stop you here. I do want you to continue, but I got to ask, had you ever, at this time, up until this time, ever heard of a triangle craft or ever seen a triangle craft? And if you wouldn't mind, forgive me here, remind us again what year this is.
Yes. The year is 1977.
Gotcha.
And the question is, did I associate the triangle with extraterrestrials, aliens, or anything?
Well, had you seen a triangle craft in a movie, in a picture? Had you heard anybody? As I recall, at 1977, I don't know that there was a whole lot out there about triangle craft.
They were all
I had-
UFO shaped, pretty much the saucers.
and
Yeah.
other shapes like what do they call that? The chevron shape and different shapes like that, elliptical
Yeah.
cigar shape. But at that time, I don't think there were any triangle craft. What I'm getting at here is Terry and Tobias may, I don't know, this is a big capital M, may have seen the first triangle craft.
Yeah, there wasn't like it was the big reports of it back then, even ufology, I don't think. I'm not
Right,
an
that's
expert,
what
but yeah.
I could be very wrong about that. But anyhow, so I apologize for stopping you there, Terry.
No. And that brings up a good point, because I kind of considered myself to be an expert on UFOs, or flying saucers, as I should say.
Mm-hmm.
And, Toby and I were convinced that the thing that we saw over Kilo 5 wasn't extraterrestrial at all, that it was somehow one of ours or one of theirs, but it was made terrestrially here on this planet. And part of the reason was that I felt like I'm the expert, and flying saucers are what aliens fly in. And this was not a flying saucer. And the size of the thing was intimidating, but I should mention that I talked about feeling calm. Well, that calmness got almost to the point of sedation. And we were both lying on these air mattresses looking up, and I guesstimate it's 3,500 feet over our heads. And we're watching it. And I don't recall either of us saying a single word to one another. And in the center, there was a round area in the center of the triangle. And from the center of that, there shot a beam of light. And when I say a beam of light, I mean like a searchlight cutting through thick fog. You know how you can see a cylinder of light.
Yes.
And that's what this was. And this cylinder of light just flipped on, and it was square in the middle of our dying campfire.
My blood would have been running cold at that moment.
Right.
And it wasn't but a minute or two. It wasn't long at all, and it switched off. And then in its stead, there was. Now, I had never heard of laser. I mean, I'd heard of lasers, but I didn't know what they were. They weren't really, talked about very much in 1977. But there was a violet-colored, pencil-thin beam of light that shot from the same place that the white beam of light came from, in the center of the triangle. And this beam of violet light darted about the campsite. And it would flip on and be at one place, then flip off, then flip on and be in another place, and flip off and then flip back on. And it danced around the campsite much quicker than that. It was like boom, 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 boom. And it hit me at least twice, and I know that it hit Toby a couple times. And we didn't feel anything.
I would have freaked out. I would have freaked out if it touched me. I'm sorry.
Oh, there's no question. We were, oh my gosh, just looking at that image. We were, no question, we were sedated something.
Yeah.
And this is how it is. Toby says, well, show's over. Because the violet light blinks out and nothing happens for a few minutes. And I recall Toby said, show's over. I didn't answer him. The two of us at the same time picked up, dragged our air mattresses in, put them down inside the tent, and laid down on them with this thing 3,500 feet over our heads. And I fell back on my air mattress, and it had cooled off some. It was almost pleasant, and I noticed that the sounds hadn't come back. And I remember thinking, Toby, you're wrong, man. The sounds never did come back. And he was snoring softly, and that's the last thing that I remember. And some hours later, there are, like in my room when I was 11, there were flashes of light, white and yellow, a deep orange this time, and there was the sound of rustling leaves going all around us, like a dozen people walking around the campsite. But I don't have my wits about me. I am in a fog, and I'm thinking that these lights are coming from the flashing overheads of a park ranger's truck. That's what it's got to be.
You think you're busted.
Right.
Yeah, they come to throw us out of the park.
Mm-hmm.
And then I noticed the droning sound, very similar to what I'd heard when I was 11. A droning sound again, but this one had a pulsing to it.
Oh my.
And I thought, well, maybe that's a generator in the back of the truck. Who'd be running a generator in the back of the truck out here? And I looked down, and my shoes were untied, or my boots are untied. And I thought that odd because I left them tied purposefully. And I look over, and I'm trying to claw my way to full consciousness here. And I see Toby on his knees, and he's got a flap of the tent pulled back just a couple of inches. And he is fixated on something outside the tent. And I'm like, Toby, what is it? Is it park rangers? What is it, man? And he didn't answer me. He just shh. And I said, Toby, tell me what is going on? And all he said was, they're still here.
Oh my God.
I climbed to my knees, and with my left shoulder, I pushed him to the side, and I pulled back the flap on my tent, and I looked out, and this thing had descended from 3,500 feet in the air to about 3,000 feet in the air. 2,500 to 3,000 feet.
Close.
It's close. It's big, and it's right on top of us.
Too close for comfort.
Oh my God, yes. And that you can see in the drawing, there's that center place where the light emanated from. That's now shining a cylinder of light about 50 feet wide or so. And again, it's a visible light, like you see that cuts through fog. It's this cylinder of light. And I'm looking, and I'm seeing these little kids. And I'm like, Toby, what the hell, man? What are these little kids doing out here? And in the flash of the light, I could see his cheeks that he'd been crying. And I thought, holy, what could move this? I mean, we were first responders. We worked together. We'd been through some crazy things. And he always kept a level head. What could move this guy to cry?
Right. You guys have seen it all, and you've seen the worst of it all.
And he said, man, those ain't no little kids. And I'm looking close, and I note that they are disproportionate in that the head to the torso, the limbs, the gait is like awkward. But they're walking around, and they're paired up in pairs of 2s and 3s. And they are walking around this meadow and kind of working their way closer to this cylinder of light. And as they would step into that cylinder of light, they would just dissolve and be gone.
Like a teleportation device of some kind.
Something. It took them back up. And we were absolutely terrified. I had never in my life been so afraid. And we were both we were frozen. I was too afraid to move. I mean, I was doing my best to keep my breath quiet. And Toby, he started to hyperventilate. I don't know if I ever mentioned this in the book or not, but he was starting to hyperventilate, and I had to get him to calm down. And when the last of these little guys stumbled into this light field and were evaporated. As soon as they were gone, that light clicked off. And we're just watching, wondering what's going to happen next. And some time passes, not a lot of time, less than half an hour. And this thing lifts off like a hot air balloon. It turns a little bit, rotates a little bit, not a full turn, but a little bit, and moves straight up like a hot air balloon. And the lights at all 3 points that were flashing yellow and green, they switched to all white. And then they started, the light would run up and down that 5-story tall light panel, if that makes sense. There was a part that was lit that would run up and down. You could see the light move up and down.
Detail. It is just amazing, Terry, that you can bring us these details. Thank you.
Well, you know, it's certainly something I'll never forget, and it was the most terrifying thing in my life. And
You know, I've heard this portion of your story 4 times now, and it gets me every single time. Every single time. And I don't want to make you uncomfortable, but I'm noticing something. I've never watched your face while you tell the story, Terry. And I have learned a little bit about observing people as they talk and as they tell stories. And what I'm seeing on your face as you tell the story, again, I don't want to make you uncomfortable here, but what I see are the markers of truth.
Exactly.
I see the emotion on your forehead. I see your eyes looking up and to the right as you're recalling the story. And if anybody has studied this before about faces and how, you know, you can tell if a person is telling the truth or making something up, they never look up and to the right. That's an indication that someone is recalling a memory. And I'm bringing this point up because I want people, I think we're about to go to a break, Jason.
Yeah. Yes.
But what I want people to understand and to think about over the break is what the man is telling us is real. And the implications of that
Are scary to me, frightening.
It's a very important story. And I just wanted to make that point. So, thank you.
thank you. And you're right. People need to know this. They need to know this stuff.
Well, people
The
watching
greatest
on.
It's the absolute. Jason, is this not one of the most important questions mankind has right now?
Exactly. Why aren't people more curious about this? Why does the media ignore it? Well, I think a lot of us know that. But why aren't people more curious about these stories? Why I see people, I try to tell people about this stuff. I'm open about the paranormal anymore in my life. I talk to people at my work. I talk to people, and I see people shut down. You know?
Sure enough.
And
Absolutely.
why? Why aren't they curious about this? Not every single person is going to be a liar about this. Is that how it works?
Betty and Barney Hill? Betty
Right.
and Barney Hill should have been the news story of the century.
Exactly. All right, guys. For people watching on Facebook, we play music out to Late Night in the Midlands Radio Network. You cannot hear on Facebook, so don't freak out. We go quiet for a minute, but we will be back with Terry Lovelace, Incident at Devil's Den, and with my great co-host tonight, Heather Wade, Kingdom of Nye, returning October 1st. All right, guys, be back in a few minutes. Tonight on Paranormal Soup, our guest is Terry Lovelace, author of Incident at Devil's Den. This is an incredible story, guys. I'm so happy to have Terry on. I've been counting down the days to this show because I feel this story is so important for people to hear. So let's get back to our guest. So you just had seen the little men or little people go up into the ship and it ascend away from you. You said it took about a half an hour later. It finally went up in the air.
Well, no, I'm not quite sure how long it was. It was probably about 20 minutes or so after the little guys evaporated, the lights shut off, and then the lights changed. And we rolled over on our backs when we watched it climb up into the air. And we waited a half an hour. We were too afraid to move for half an hour. And we were afraid to speak. And the thought, it sounds crazy, but the thought of leaving the tent scared me to death.
That
I
doesn't
did
sound
not-
crazy.
And to this day, I do not like to be in wide open spaces by myself. And Toby's like, man, we got a plan. We got to have a plan. We got to do something. We got to get out of here. And he says, on 3, I got the flashlight. You got the keys. On 3, let's sprint to the car and get out of here. And I'm like, Toby, it's pitch black out there. Can you get us out of here safely? And he's like, man, I got this little map. I wrote. And he still had that in his pocket. And we did that. We sprinted to the car, terrified, looking at the ground all the way, afraid to look up. And, got in the car and hit the high beams and got out of there.
Left everything behind, right? You didn't pack up the tent. You just took off.
Took off. I took my wallet, my keys, and Toby left his backpack there with, he had a little Instamatic camera that has, I think, a 16 millimeter negative. It would have, I mean, it's good for a birthday party, but it wouldn't have been of much use that evening. And the thought of using it never crossed our minds either. So, but there were 2 odd things. Number one, when we got into the car and Toby got us out of there, as soon as we hit Blacktop and I knew we were safe and we were out of the park and we're headed north, Toby curled up into a ball, like a fetal position, and was snoring. And I remember, being offended by that for some reason. And I thought, where does that come from? And then I'm thinking, this is all his fault. This was his idea. And I mean, and that's not like me. I mean, that's not me at all. And we were both sunburned on every square inch of our bodies. I mean, the soles of my feet were sunburned. Wow.
What?
Yes, we were sunburned on, and that's why we were hospitalized.
Yes.
Was dehydration. The dehydration was incredibly thirsty. I remember saying, Toby, I woke him up. I said, man, look around this car and see if you can find us something to drink. I'll drink anything that won't poison me.
Same thing Travis Walton talked about, being incredibly thirsty after his ordeal.
Yes.
It was unbelievable. And, there's just not a lot out there. On a Saturday morning at the break of dawn in rural Missouri at that time, we drove for probably an hour before we found a place open, a little like gas and go place, local place, and pulled in. And I got a 6-pack of orange soda. He got a gallon of grapeade. And I remember the sunlight. My eyes were just so photophobic. It hurt. And
almost like you'd been out of the sunlight for a long, long time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like if your pupils are fully dilated and you walk into a bright room. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But there was also this feeling like I had sand in my eyes. I kept rubbing my eyes because they itched. It felt like I had sand in them. And I drained these 6 cans of soda in 15 minutes. They were gone. And I was craving more. And Toby had killed most of his gallon of grape drink. And I thought, I should take that. And I thought, no, what am I thinking? I shouldn't do that. What am I thinking? But the point I'm making here is that after this thing, there was a distinct change in our relationship. We went from being the best of friends to, I know it sounds like I didn't want anything to do with the guy. And I didn't understand where that was coming from. I didn't understand that emotion at all. our wives were best friends. They had a couple little kids, and they were like our kids too. And all of a sudden, things just changed. So we got home. I dropped Toby off, and like I say, I don't think there were 5 words said between us on this trip back. I remember we were about 15 minutes out, and I shook him to wake him up, and I said, "Tobe, we're about 15 minutes out, man." And he mumbled something and sat up, and we got on base. We both lived in NCO housing. He was 2 blocks from my house. I dropped him off, and I went home. I walked in the front door, and my wife takes one look at me and says, "What the hell?" And she's, hang on just a moment. I got a low battery here. I got to fix.
Uh-oh. Yeah, we don't want that. Definitely take care of
No
that.
worries. Go right ahead.
Yep.
We're just enthralled listening to you right now. We wouldn't want you to the battery die on us.
Quick fix. There we go.
All right.
I dropped Toby off, and he stumbled up the driveway. I got home. My wife was she took one look at me and said, "You're going to the hospital." And
I'm
before
sure
she
Toby's
did
wife
that,
did the same.
yeah, exactly. She took my temperature, and I had a temperature of like 104.
Oh, wow.
And she drew a cool bath for me. And I had these angry red bites all over me, which I was told were sugar bites. But it was odd in that they were kind of equally proportioned all over my body, where when I've seen people with sugar bites, they kind of cluster at your waistband or where your socks are.
Mm-hmm.
But when we got there, they kept us segregated. And I was ordered not to talk to Toby, not to have anything to do with him or his family, ordered by our CO. And
just after a good old American camping trip.
Right.
Well, you know what happened is we left our bag there, and that had Toby's camera and his address in it. So when the park rangers found our little campground the next day, they knew that we were from the air base, and they called the base, talked to someone, and eventually filtered down and got to our base commander and into our hospital's squadron commander.
Mm-hmm.
And I found out later he was the one that notified the OSI because of the odd nature of our injuries. The OSI is the investigative branch of the Air Force's security police.
Office of Special Investigations?
Yes.
People you don't want to be brought to their attention.
Correct, Jason.
Do not. Yeah, they're kind of like NCIS is to the Navy. They're the investigative guys that wear suits. We were both hospitalized. I found out later we were both classified as acutely ill when we were admitted. And, I had the most thorough examination of my life. And I do remember my eyes were closed most of the time because I couldn't open them, because every time I did, I felt like I had sand in my eyes. So I kept my eyes closed. But I know what a Geiger counter sounds like, and I heard the growl of a Geiger counter.
Oh, my God.
So I knew that they were scanning me for that. And I was admitted, and I got a room to myself, which was in 1977 in the Air Force unheard of for an enlisted man to get a private room. I mean,
You're
I would
being
be on an open
quarantined.
ward. Yeah, I was being quarantined, exactly. And same with Tobias. And squadron commander came in and was firm but polite and said, you guys are to have no contact. And he says, when I say no contact, he says, I don't mean through your wives or through passing notes. You're not to have any contact until we can figure out what happened to you guys. And, that was just fine with me at the moment, because I wanted to see Toby one last time to say goodbye. I felt like I needed to do that. But at the same time, our relationship had changed. And we were separated. I went to a supply squadron. to work for a while until he was shipped off to Japan. And
Were you ever given any medical diagnosis or cause for your condition?
no, never was. And I got a copy of my military medical records. And in them, for the date of June 11th, there's nothing. There's nothing.
Jeez.
There's nothing there.
Oh, that's strange. Shouldn't there be an entry that you were admitted at least?
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely, it should be. An admitting diagnosis and an examine, all of that stuff should be there. But what they did have was, a few days later, like June 14th, they had me listed as low back pain, low back injury, and gave me off duty. And
That's incredible.
I was off duty for about 4 weeks, and I needed it. I needed 4 weeks to recover. I mean, I was really in bad shape.
Seems like a long recovery time for just minor lower back pain.
Sure does, and you know, my back never bothered me.
I've never heard you mention that ever,
Yeah.
and I hope I don't know. I hope we don't run out of time, Terry. But there's another aspect of your story that I've never been able to really shake, and that is your incredible weight loss. When did that begin?
It began when I started writing the book.
Ah, yes, right, yeah, and this is we're talking incredible weight loss. Are you still taking in about 3,000 to 4,000 calories a day to keep up, Terry?
Yeah, I am.
incredible.
I'm eating calorie-dense food. You know, those drinks that they sell as a dietary supplement.
Mm-hmm.
I down 3 of those for breakfast every morning and try to get 3 down at night. But I really don't have much of an appetite. But before we run out of time,
Yeah, yeah.
I'm sorry.
Well, I have to say, I want to bring this up. One of my favorite parts of the book is when, because you were you were under heavy scrutiny during this time period by the OSI and a couple agents, and the part where they made you feel threatened to the point of that you're going to go to military jail, court-martialed, that they got you to go under hypnosis from this. Was he a colonel? I was another. I don't know if he was OSI or what he was, but they put you under this hypnosis. And reason it's my favorite part is because of how you tried to fight it, and what you learned from that experience.
Yeah, it was an amazing experience. And I'll get right to that, but if we have time, I'd like to explain how the OSI agents came into my hospital room, because I think that's pertinent. And
Yeah.
they kept the lights off in my room because I was so photophobic. And when my nurse came in with my pain medicine, which I needed, these 2 guys in suits followed her in. And I mean, these guys were cops. I mean, they looked like cops. They had on business suits, but they had the cropped haircut, flat top, I think they used to call it. One guy about in his maybe late 40s, early 50s, and another younger guy, early 30s. And they came in and cranked my bed up, and so I was sitting upright, took everything off my side table, rolled the table over underneath me, and started laying out forms. And he hit the overhead light, and I'm like, "Sir, could you please turn that off? My eyes are killing me." And this guy had the oddest accent. He ended almost every sentence he ended with "son." And he said, "I gotta see what we're doing here, son. Can't work in the dark, can we?" And he asked me a bunch of, they interrogated me there. And they confused me. They asked me questions with multiple parts. So it wasn't yes or no. It deserved an explanation. And yeah, they intimidated me. And when I told them, they wanted to know where we stayed. And I told them in the park. And I said, Toby drew a map. It's in the glove box of my car. And this captain, they they didn't wear insignia of rank, but their insignia of rank was on their identification that they held up and showed me. And they went to my house and got my car. I didn't know this, but they had me signing forms. I signed a consent to search form. And they went to the house and scared my wife to death. And toward the end of the conversations, because I want to get to the hypnosis, the captain leaves, and this major, the real tough guy, bends over my bed and next to my ear, and he whispers, "I know, and you know what you two knuckleheads stumbled into, son. And I think you took pictures of it because I had a reputation as an amateur photographer." And he said, "I want your camera and I want your film." And he said, "If you don't give it to me, son, there will be hell to pay." And reinforced the no contact order with Toby, and turned out the light. I never understood that. What an odd guy. Turned off the light, shut the door, and left. But yeah, it was weeks later, maybe 6 weeks later. I'm working in the supply department doing just menial work. And first sergeant came and said, "They want to see you at OSI headquarters." Actually, they sent me to the CO. CO told me there's going to be a car come for you, park right out front to take you to OSI headquarters. They want to talk to you. And I remembered our hospital commander, who was really a good guy, that his parting words to me were, "Don't screw with these OSI people." And he didn't need to say that. I was afraid of him anyway. Well, I went out front, and there was a car waiting for me, a blue security police squad car, and a senior airman in uniform opened the back door for me, shut the door. First time I'd ever been in a police car. Never seen no hand cranks. Anyway, drove us to OSI headquarters. We went through a couple of buzz door locks where you walk in, they press a button, buzz, it opens, you go in, it clicks, shuts like a bank vault. He walked me down this long hallway to all of the rooms were numbered on this corridor, like A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And that was it. There was about 7 or 8 of them.
Mm-hmm.
And took me in, I think it was room D, opened the door, and said, "Someone will be with you shortly," and shut the door. And this room was standard. If you could think of an interrogation room, that's what this was. There was nothing but a desk with a padded chair, and there were 3 of these fiberglass chairs, like in the 60s they used to have.
Oh, yeah.
Like a schoolhouse electric wall clock above the door. And there was a mirror that I'm certain must have been a two-way affair. And I wanted to go up and cup my hands and look through it, but I didn't do that. And I sat, and this was roughly 9 o'clock, and I didn't see a soul cross past that window. And it wasn't till almost noon that the 2 OSI agents that saw me in the hospital, the same 2 guys, came in, and first thing he did was ejected me out of the padded chair and maybe sit in one of the fiberglass ones. And he took the comfortable one, and they went about their business. They're setting things up. They're talking about golf. They're ignoring me. And they had a little tape recorder, little cassette tape recorder with little tiny wheels. I'd never seen one before. They had that set up, but it wasn't running yet. And he asked me, he said, "You know you're going to be hypnotized today?" And I said, "No, I didn't know, Agent Gregory." And he's like, "Oh, yeah. And I said, "But why? I don't want to be hypnotized." And he goes ballistic and pulls the signed consent out of his briefcase and slams it on the table in front of me. And he said, he taps it with his fingers. He says, "This is all the why I need, son." And it was my signature on the consent form that I signed when I was in the hospital. Of course, I didn't have the benefit of a legal education at the
Not
time.
then. Yeah.
So, I was scared to death. I didn't know what to do but cooperate. And there was a knock at the door, and a major, where gold oak leaves on his collars, tapped at the door, and the captain let him in. And he came into this interrogation room. And it was obvious everyone knew each other. And they were talking about golf. Now, I guess Major didn't fish. They were talking about golf and still ignoring me. And finally, this major sits down next to me, and he kicked Agent Gregory out of the comfortable chair and took it. So that's the hierarchy, I guess. And he rolled his chair right up next to mine. He had in his hands, he carried it under his arm, what looked like a shaving kit made out of leather. And it was a little larger than a shaving kit, maybe 3 inches deep, 6 or 8 inches, and about a foot long. And he says, "How do you do, Sergeant Lovelace? My name's Major Brownfield. How are you today?" And I said, "I'm okay, sir." And he said, "No, Sergeant Lovelace, for purpose of today's little exercise, would you call me Brad? That is my name." And I said, "Yes, sir." And he says, No. Don't you mean, yes, Brad?" And I said, "Yes, Brad." And he says, "And for purposes of today's little exercise, may I call you Terry?" And I said, "Yes, sir, you may." "Yes." And he had opened this little kit while we were talking. He laid out a towel. And on this little towel, he laid out a piece of rubber tubing, some alcohol pads. There was a syringe with some yellow liquid in it, a blood pressure cuff, and a stethoscope. And he says, "I'm going to give you a drug." And I'm like, "Sir, what is the purpose of this drug?" Well, I should back up. While he's setting all this up, he says, "Now this is important." And he starts asking me, "Where are you from?" And I said, "Well, St. Louis." And he starts what was a pleasant conversation. And he rattled off some landmarks. And I'm smiling and I'm talking, and he's smiling and nodding his head appropriately. And I'm thinking, I'm just not that interesting. Something else is going on here. And then pretty soon he switches gears and gets his little medical kit out and reaches over and takes my arm and lays it down and starts rolling up my sleeve. And I'm like, "Sir, what is this for?" And he raised his voice and said, "My, for someone who claims to trust me, you sure have a lot of questions." And the two OSI agents about jumped out of their chairs. So that kind of set the tone. And he had my arm. And my undergrad degree is in psychology. And I was taking psychology classes on the base and had been taking them I had about 3 years under my belt at this point. And I knew a little bit about hypnosis. And I knew that people could resist hypnosis and not be forced under a hypnotic trance. That there had to be some compliance, some kind of a agreement, but the drug had me worried because I didn't know what the drug would do to me.
It's not usual for hypnosis to drug you. Oh, we got an echo. Don't know what from.
Oh, it's back?
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, he found a vein, complimented me on, my, you have good veins. Just
Oh,
really
well,
just
weird.
weird guy, creepy guy.
Eesh.
And he gives me the injection, and immediately, this wasn't like anything I'd ever had before. Immediately, I felt a flush. I felt, warm all over. Every muscle in my body was relaxed. And I kind of let my head droop, and because that's the way I felt. But I'm thinking, I'm not going to surrender my mind to this guy. I am not going to do that.
Good for you.
And he said, well, what we're going to do now, Terry, is I want you to visualize the stairway. There's a little stairway, and I'm going to have you walk down the stairs. Can you see it in your mind's eye now, Terry? Can you see a stairway? And I said, yes, Brad. And I did see a stairway. I conjured up a stairway in my head. And he said, now I want you to take the first step. And when you take that first step, I want you to feel relaxed. And then I want you to take the second step. And with each step you take, you're going to feel twice as relaxed, feeling easy, feeling calm. Everything is fine. Take that next step, Terry. As he's telling me this, in my mind's eye, I'm walking up the stairwell.
That's why I love this story.
And he asked me when I get to the bottom, he says, okay, we're going to look around a little bit, Terry. You need to reach up and turn on that light. Can you see the cord hanging down? It's right in front of you. Can you see a cord? And I couldn't see a cord. There's no cord. But he said, I want you to reach up and turn off that light, or turn on that light. And I didn't do anything. And I was expecting my arm to move involuntarily, and it didn't. And I knew that I wasn't at least under his control all the way. So a second time, he said more forcefully, I want you to reach up and turn on that light. And I did. And I reached up with my hand, and I made a motion like I was pulling a chain. And I remember thinking, yeah, I'm pulling your chain, all right. And
By the way, I'm blowing the last break because I want to make sure we get this out.
And I dropped my hand back into my lap, and he says, now, Terry, you and Tobias went on a little camping trip, didn't you? And I said, yes, sir, we did. And he said, and when you were out there, you just saw something, didn't you? What'd you see? And it must have been the influence of the drug. But in my mind's eye, I saw this all replay with crystal clarity. I saw this all over again. And the emotion was there as well. And I said, I think they're going to take us, Brad. And I thought, where did that come from? Did that come out of my mouth? Did I say that? Because I decided I wasn't going to cooperate with him. And I had no choice. As far as what I saw in my mind's eye. And he said, so we saw the giant triangle. I described it to him. And he knew from the beginning what we saw. Because what he said was, he said, you saw some stars in the sky, didn't you? Yes, sir. But they weren't stars, were they, Terry? We know better, don't we? And I said, yes, sir. They weren't stars. And he says, what were they, Terry? And I said, it was a big spaceship. And he said, do you know them? And I said, I call them the space people. And I'm thinking, whoa, I cannot believe the words that were coming out of my mouth. And I'm having memories of real events that happened. And it must have been the influence of this drug that I was able to see these things and recall these things so clearly. And he asked me to describe the inside of the ship. And I remember being inside the ship, and it looked bigger inside than it did outside, and it had the feel of being in some kind of gigantic warehouse. And there were 3 flying saucers parked in like a neat little row, I remember. And just, like below deck on a carrier, they were just parked there. And there were people milling about. And I heard a woman screaming. I recalled that. I also saw a group of about 50 people, humans. They were nude and they had their clothing in their hands. And I thought, where did all these people come from? And it bothers me to this day that I don't know what happened to those poor souls.
Oh,
Right,
it's always bothered me, Terry.
Yeah, that's what bothered me in the book is like, did they get dropped back off? Or were they never coming home?
Yeah, I don't know. I know why I'm very thankful to have survived it and been able to come home. When I was standing there and I was frozen and all I could move was my eyes. And we were led around by the little gray guys, which, by the way, I'm not sure they're even living beings. I think, or maybe they're a cross between some kind of biological thing and artificial intelligence.
I've heard as
They're
much.
kind of little
Yes.
robots.
Yeah. Were you frightened at this moment, Terry?
Scared to death. Absolutely scared out of my wits. I would have been screaming had I been able to. As I move my eyes, I'm looking around and there's a taller guy who's gray and he's about 6 feet tall and he seems to be running the show. And I had to strain my eyes as far as I could to look at him. And by happenstance, he turned his head at that same moment and we locked eyes. And in that instant that we locked eyes, I think I say in the book, I felt naked. I felt
Saw
like
right
this
inside
guy,
of you.
he was in my head. He knew everything about me. He knew my life. He knew my dreams. He knew my memories. He knew everything about me. And in back of those eyes, there was not a bit of mercy or love or empathy. It was intelligence. It was just raw intellect behind those eyes. And that scared me to death. And as I said, I mentioned the woman was screaming, and finally that stopped. And we were marched down a corridor through what I thought were aquariums. They were on a wall to my right. We were marched down, and it was Tobias, myself, and a few others being herded around by these little guys. And I'm looking to my right and I see these things. They're full of pink water and they have inside them what look like puppies. And I couldn't understand what these things were. And I'm relaying this to Brad. I'm telling him my memory of this. But I'm watching it play out like in real time. And I'm looking at one of these things and it twitches. And it scared me and I screamed. And there's a blank space after that. And I kind of regained my senses with him taking my blood pressure. And said, "You're back with us now, Terry? We got some things to talk about." And I noticed, in addition to those 50 humans, there were some other human beings there, about a half a dozen. One of them was a female, Hispanic looking and short, and the other were just guys about my age. They wore tan uniforms, and they had orange insignias on their shoulder and an orange, like a name tag or something across their chest. For the life of me, for 45 years, I'd love to know what was on that emblem. and
Oh,
I
yeah.
can't see it. I cannot see it. But this guy was obviously human, and he was standing in front of a panel, and there were actual wires and stuff in there. And he was doing something inside this panel, and I tried to get his attention, but again, they have control of me. And he finishes his job, walks away, just ignores us. And I've always wondered, were those men and women in a branch of the military that?
That's my first thought when I read that in your book, and they call it like, are you a MyLab, part of the military extraterrestrial partnership, of some kind is what makes you wonder. And the other thing is, you talked about the pink fluid in the tanks. Reminds me of the I know, Heather, you've heard of the Dulce base incident, and I think that was 79.
Yes.
And a lot of descriptions of people of the Dulce base and what's down there is these vats of fluid, like blood plasma.
Yes,
and
this
body
I've
parts.
Yes.
That's what
and
I thought of.
find it very interesting. Did either of you see that film, The Abyss?
Yes.
Oh,
Well,
I've not.
You haven't seen it, Terry? Well, there's a scene, and
Oh, yeah.
Jason, correct me if I have this wrong, but I believe in The Abyss, there's a scene where they have to send a diver so
Yes.
far down under the water that the diver is going to suffer, incredible pressures. So in order to survive that, they have some special pink fluid that the diver has to actually breathe. And at the time, this is some sort of advanced technology that none of us know about. And when I hear Terry's story, it makes me think back to that movie. And did somebody on the crew of that film know something?
It does remind me of that too. The pink fluid I think it was Ed Harris, the actor. He had to breathe it in as he went down. Yeah. Oh, I love that movie.
Exactly.
Oh yeah.
Breathing the fluid. And when I think of these creatures that Terry is describing, he says they looked like maybe puppies of some kind, and they're in this fluid, and one of them twitches. It made me think, well, they're living, they're alive, they're breathing this fluid. I try to make correlations. Jason, is all. I just
that's
find
a good
it
one.
odd.
Because who knows what they have to survive with either.
Yeah,
I might mention. I just might mention that I haven't watched The Abyss. I've never really watched. I didn't see Independence Day. I shied away from anything UFO or extraterrestrial related because I knew what the penalty would be. The penalty would be screaming nightmares. So it was an untalked about topic in my household, but we all knew that, Dad didn't want UFO stuff on the television.
I know we only have like 15 minutes of the show, and there's so much to this story, people. I highly recommend you have to read the book. There's so much more to this. There's so much more. My 3-hour show can't cover it. Heather has done amazing jobs with her 4-hour show. But one of the questions I had, too, is when you saw the saucers inside the bigger craft, did they happen to resemble the one you saw as a kid?
Yes. Yes.
That's what I wondered, because they have to have sports vehicles, something, taxi cabs, it just makes you wonder.
Well, this, again, correlations that I like to make, Jason. I have a very controversial top secret document. And in this document, the extraterrestrial that's being interviewed in the document is asked, exactly how do you visit, our planet and these sort of things. And of course, I'm not here to tell anybody the document is real, but in that interview, the extraterrestrial does say that, we have a big giant, a much larger craft that parks outside of the solar system, and we take smaller ones on in. So again, here's another correlation from our witness, Terry, who saw it with his own eyes. I mean, I really want people listening to us tonight to let that sink in, what this man has seen, what he has been near, what he's been exposed to, and live to tell us the tale. I think we're very lucky, Terry, that you're here to talk, that you can talk about it, and you remember what you do. And my hat is absolutely off to you, sir.
Well, thank you. I want as many people to hear this as possible.
The reason I wanted to hear this story really quick, though, the reason I wanted to hear the story about the hypnosis really quick, too, is the comment that's made by the major while you're being he thinks you're under whatever. There's a comment or a couple comments like that basically reveal they know about all of this.
Yes, yes. And I love the arrogance of the major. Again, I was playing Beatle music in my head.
Oh, yeah.
And going through lyrics, and then Rolling Stones, and then I did multiplication tables. I tried to preserve a corner of my mind, if that makes sense, and not surrender my whole mind to these guys.
Mm-hmm.
And the major said at one time, or the captain asked, I recognized his voice, the captain said, "Is he under?" And the major said, "Oh yeah, piece of cake. He was gone by 3." And I thought, yeah, no, you're wrong. I'm not gone. I'm here. I'm hearing. And it brought back the memory of some childhood events too. Mostly that I had gone with the monkeys, and memory of being in a room with other children.
Oh, yeah.
And I think this was before I was the age of 8. I would have been much younger at this point. And some of these are actually recent nightmares and recent memories. I recall playing with other children in this room. And the woman that was there during my childhood, I would see her again and again. In 1987, 10 years after, I thought this was all behind me. 10 years after, I'm on a motorcycle ride, which I did, for recreation by myself, across the countryside, rural countryside. And I never took my bike off the blacktop because I didn't want, rocks or dings, and never took it on gravel. And I realized suddenly I'm on a gravel road. And I'm like, that's unusual. And I, took my helmet off, looked around, tried to get my bearings, and put my helmet back on, went back to the blacktop, and came home to a hysterical wife because I was 3 hours late. And those were 3 hours of missing time that I'll get to. This is the introduction of the woman. And
Betty?
Betty. Yes. Betty. Let me jump to Betty now.
Yeah, we don't have a lot of time, so I want some people to get to this.
Because it's good.
Mm-hmm.
My wife and I went out for dinner November 2017. By the way, but I'll get to that. Go out to dinner, watch the movie. Nothing of the paranormal genre. I don't remember what we saw. Came home, she went to bed. I went through my usual routine of locking the door. There's Betty. Locking the door, setting the alarm. I got a little ritual. I button the house up. By my bedside, I've always kept, a revolver and a high power flashlight. I woke up. I went to bed with my wife. I woke up at 3:18, 3:20, something like that, sitting in my bedroom. Oh, pardon me, in my living room. And I'm sitting bolt upright, and I'm wide awake, but I'm calm. And seated across from me is what I first took to be about a 4 foot tall or a little bit taller Asian woman with oversized sunglasses and a black wig. And the wig reminded me of Betty Rubble from the Flintstones. That's the thought that passed my mind. And I forgot that they communicate telepathically. And what crosses your mind is what they hear. So it takes more discipline than I have to not think things that are inappropriate or not think things that I necessarily wouldn't want her to know. And I told her so. And she made the comment, "You don't like my wig? It's the same as last time." And of course, my thought was, when was last time?
All right.
And it was 1987 on the motorcycle ride. And then I remembered. And she remembered, you remembered the trip to the moon. And I said, yeah, I do now. I do. And she played out for me the vignette of what happened when I was taken off the motorcycle in 1987. Yeah. I went to a saucer. I was put on board a saucer. And from the saucer, I was ferried to this bigger ship. Now, in the interrogation, I told Brad about this. I told Brad, they have bigger ships. They have humongous ships. So I had to have been on one prior to 1987 to have knowledge of it.
Right.
So she told me the dimensions, and she said they could never fly in front of the moon. And I thought, why? And she says, because the ship is so large, it can be seen by people. And I had memories of being with her in 1987 in, again, what I thought was a gigantic warehouse, but there was this window, this huge panel of a window that looked out over like 1 trillion stars. And I had my motorcycle helmet in my right hand, and I was holding hands with her. And I'm looking out the window, and there's no sensation of movement whatsoever. And from the right side rolls the moon. And we must have been 30,000 feet above it. And it was a full bright moon.
Wow.
Crosses our path and scares me to death. And I'm screaming, it's going to hit us. And she communicates to me, no, Terry, we're moving. The moon is stationary. And that's when we went to the far side of the moon, and the ship turned, and we weren't facing stars anymore. We were facing jet black. We were looking at the moon. And we traveled some distance, and there were specks of light. And then on the horizon, there were buildings, and then a lot of lights. And the buildings were haphazard. And I mean, this place was like LAX. It was like flying into LAX. It was huge. But something looked odd, and I realized that there were no streets. When you look down from an airliner, you see streets and parking lots and cars, and there was none of that. There was just this random collection of, 100 buildings. And she told me, and I think I said it in the book, that people from Earth come here and live here and have for 3 generations. And she said others come here too, and they share it, the resources they share. And I thought, what do they come for? What resource could be here? And she said, the rocks. They come here for the rocks.
For helium-3?
That's
got to be helium-3.
Yeah.
I'd never heard of it before in my life until this book, and someone pointed out to me that there's a...
Terry, I hate to say it, but we're at the last 5 minutes. I have to end the show. This is so incredible. I knew it was going to be tough to fit in this story, and I encourage people to get this book, Internet Devil's Den. I truly do. I mean, there's so much more to this story.
There's a good side here. All you need to do now is have a part 2 with Terry.
Honestly, I need to have a part 2 with Terry. You're
Yes.
exactly right, because there's so much more. There's so much more to this story, and I love it. I do want to show one thing really quick before we go. The implants in this conversation, if I remember right, with Betty, she told you they were going to remove them, right?
She did. She told me in our conversation. I asked her, why are you here? Is this about the things in my leg? And she says, it's about the thing in your legs, plural.
Plural.
And I said, I didn't know. I have one in my left leg. And she says, yes, you have implants in both legs. And she said, if you talk about this and you write your book, my host will come and take the property back. That thing that you have in your knee belongs to them, and they'll come and retrieve it. And I said, well, how would they do that? And she said, they'll come in the middle of the night, and you'll have no pain, and you'll not know it. Well, she was half right. I didn't know about it, what was happening, but I woke up and I felt like somebody hit me in the upper thigh, both thighs, with a baseball bat. And I thought, my God, she wasn't lying. They came and they got their thing.
Yeah,
And
we're
I went
showing the
out-
pictures right now. This is the bruising around your thigh.
Yes, yes. And I was curious. The thing in my leg is at the lower part of my leg near my knee. But the observation the chiropractor made that was kind enough to help me get an x-ray was those two wires run up. So
Yeah.
you have no idea what's above that. And I know I hurt. That was November 17th of 2017. And I was able to get you can't walk in and get a x-ray on demand.
No.
And I thought, I bet this chiropractor would help me. Just, I'm, trying to think of anything to get an x-ray. And I walk into the guy's office and I asked to speak with him. And he says, well, yeah, you have an appointment? What do you need? I said, well, I need your help. And I hold up a picture of my x-ray. And I said, I have this thing that I think is an alien implant in my leg. And I think they came and retrieved it last night. And I need somebody to give me an order to get an x-ray. Would you do that for me? And he's grabbed me by the arm and he's escorting me to the door. And I'm holding this x-ray up because he thinks I'm a lunatic.
Right.
Oh, no.
And he sees the thing in the upper right corner. And he stops dead in his tracks. And he says, come into my office. And I went into his office and we sat down. And I wish I could have named him in the book, but I can't. And he said, tell me about this. And I mean, his phone is ringing, people were banging at his door. And I told him the whole story. And he wrote me a script for an x-ray and paid for it.
And the
on the
implants
spot.
were gone.
Implants were gone.
Except for
With
a
the
wire.
exception. Yeah, they didn't get it all.
Yep. That will be part 2. We have to have you back on, Terry. I'm so sorry we are out of time, and I ran over my 5 minute towards the end mark. Sorry, Katie. But thank you so much, Heather, for connecting me with Terry. Like I said, it's made me think.
You're
made me think-
welcome.
Made me think very
Most
deeply
welcome.
about my own situation. October 1st, Return of the Kingdom of Nye. I cannot wait. I am so excited.
Thank you so much, Jason. And I hope you'll let me know when you do have Terry on your show again, because I want to hear the part 2.
Oh, definitely. And you're invited to come back on for part 2. I know you've heard the story, but I know you love hearing it again. So
Please do.
Love to join you. Thank you very much. It's been a fantastic evening, you guys.
Thank you both.
Thank you, Terry. Again, check out his book, Incident at Devil's Den. Next week, no Paranormal Soup. It's my son's birthday, so I'm taking the night off and focusing on that. Again, Terry, we got to get together, part 2 of this. We got to talk more about that. There's so much more to the story.
We have a
All
lot
right.
to talk about.
Oh,
Thank
yeah.
you.
Thank you, guys. Thanks, everybody, for watching who came out tonight. Sorry, we just ran out of time. There was no way I was going to get phone calls, and I had a bad feeling that was going to happen, but it was worth it. It was worth it totally, because that's how much important I think this story is, because people need to know there's something going on, and our government is hiding it. All right, guys, everybody, have a great night. See you next week. Same bad time, same bad channel. See you then.
Thank you for listening to Paranormal Soup right here on Late Night in the Midlands Radio Network. Be sure to catch us here each week, Sunday night, 11 p.m. Eastern Time, 8 p.m. Pacific.